broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hi, everybody, and good evening. This is Michael, and this is our 50th program along this line, the science of triangles. I don't suppose it will ever really end. By the time we finish with this kind of thing, DK will be writing in a new way, and hopefully we'll be able to understand these things. This wonderful quotation, you're familiar with it. I just wanted to, again, bring it to your attention. He's talking about the interlocking forces of all the 12 constellations as they pour into and through all the kingdoms in nature, carrying with them not only their own individual potencies, but also those of the seven rays, focused through the sacred and non-sacred planets, and through the constellations and focused in the sacred and non-sacred planets, and really much more focusing going on than we may realize. DK sometimes gives us the kind of ray that is passing through a planet. At the same time, more rays than he gives pass through, and you have to kind of look here and there, and then you do see him mentioning that. It is now. This is the amazing thing here. So the discovered and the undiscovered planetary lives, and what does he say? What do we have? Something like 115, more than that, in our solar system. So we're just starting here with the ABCs of knowing what contributes to this amazing web of interlocking energies. And this is the point. It has been occultly said that a vision of these powers and their many weaving lines, seen as rivers and streams of light, is given to the initiate from the mountaintop of Capricorn, once that summit has been reached. It is at the Transfiguration initiation that this vision appears to the eyes of the astounded disciple. The great experiences upon the various mountaintops, as related in the Bible, all have to do with Capricorn. I guess whenever it did take place, Moses was taking the third initiation when he ascended to that mountain and brought down the 10 commandments, and it may have been a much earlier time than we know. So there's much in the sort of history and the mythology of all these things that is not obvious to us, and we have to learn more and more about that. So that's something to keep in mind, page 167 of Esoteric Astrology, and I always find it inspiring to read that, and to see the kind of thing that our studies excuse me, may lead us to. So let's just, just for a moment, kind of gather together here and imagine that, in a way, we stand on this mountain of consciousness, wherein a transitional entry into the cosmic can begin, that is, from the higher mental plane. And we, expand our imagination to all the different parts of our planet, which our planet being much more complex than we normally think. We just normally think of the physical planet without the other envelopes of subtle energy. And we don't think in terms of 7 planetary chains and 7 globes in each chain. None of that is current except among the esotericists. And those living beings, which are planetary deities, the discovered and the undiscovered, the tangible and the etheric, and those that are moving towards incarnation and those that are emerging from incarnation, many. And everything, you know, sort of extra solar systemic, our solar god and other major solar deities that are forming the 7 solar systems, of which ours is one. There are ways it is shown how in Cosmic Fire you can, well, out of the 3 you can certainly make 7. And out of the 7, you can make 12. And it gives us the method of doing that in one of the footnotes. Everything is beautifully organized in the heavens, even if the planetary deities have not yet entirely mastered their field of manifestation. It's coming. And obviously the sacred planets are farther along than the non-sacred planets in this mastery, this etheric mastery, especially to bring order and design to the dense physical plane. And it just goes on, you know, when you have a map like this, and this is just the beginning, it's just pointing to not just one about whom not to be said, but maybe 49 here and 7 more and still another, and the galaxy is one about whom not may be said, and finally, you know, on we go till we reach this deity that we'll call the universal logos, of which there have been an infinitude forever, and it's certainly one about whom maybe too much is said. Well, we can't know much except that it has to exist. So we're making a little, you know, scientific penetration into these flowing energies, and we have a bit to memorize, you know. It's very good to be able to run down the 7 rays and understand which of the which 3 constellations bring in the each ray, and what are the soul and personality rays of the various planets. We need to know our alphabet, and it may seem a little bit daunting at first, but if we care enough about it, you know, remember he did say that the astrology book was the most occult book he had written because it really deals exclusively with energy. So it depends on how deeply we want to go into these matters. It's a long study, and we can imagine that Master DK has studied for centuries upon centuries to reach the position of knowledge where he now stands. Even back in the Pythagorean days, he was a significant scholar, so that's 2,500 years ago, and some of us are just kind of starting out. Anyway, what man has done, man can do. So if we care enough, we will move forward and put these things under our belt, so to speak, and learn, head towards planetary omniscience and solar systemic omniscience, and, you know, the spheres of omniscience go on, and we do that with confidence. Just like to welcome here Anne and Annette and Antoinette and Ario, and Barbara, and Brennan, Bruno, Catherine, Dana, Helen, Ishtar, Karen and Carrie, Leslie, Lona, Mariana, Mariut, Nyanka, Stacia, Winnie, and Ivanka, and over here on the staff side, Biel and I think Michael Stacy and Tuya are over here. And so we'll get into our 50th Science of Triangles discussion. And the thing is, you know, look, we're just beginners, okay? So don't hesitate to ask questions or to make statements that you think need to be made, simply because you may feel you don't know enough. Nobody knows enough. We students, we don't know enough, but we certainly know more than we did when we began these studies, don't we? I guess I've been studying this stuff now for over 50 years in this incarnation. And, you know, little by little, the necessary connections begin to dawn and the accumulation that one needs arises, and we'll do okay. We will do okay. So just persist, and the light will dawn and the right relations will come, and we will be useful in terms of the will when it comes to our yes, I hear a sound. Will be useful in terms of the will when it comes to these things and help to carry out the divine plan. Okay, now we've been talking about signs of crisis and the various crises through which humanity passes. You know, that's been our theme, the crisis of incarnation under Cancer, and there are other signs too of orientation or reorientation, where we reverse the wheel under Aries, and Libra is involved in that. We've been the crisis of initiation, that's Capricorn, and there's that funny word expansion, whereas the normal consideration of Saturn and Capricorn is not about expansion, it's about, you know, some kind of constriction, but this is a special type of expansion seen from the point where all the paths come together. And the crisis of renunciation is crucifixion. Maybe you wouldn't expect to see Gemini there. There are other signs there as well. Gemini being the head of the cosmic Christ. And Gemini somehow offering this great heart energy, this love, wisdom energy. And remember that although the heart is involved in all of these different initiations, to some degree, there's going to be a constant opening of the heart, you know. It is particularly the chakra that is brought forward as significant at the fourth initiation. Sacral center first, solar plexus second, ajna center third, heart fourth, and base of the spine of all things at the fifth initiation. The crisis of the battlefield, there are many, and naturally Scorpio finds its place there, and we learn the meaning and uses of conflict, and then the crisis of the birthplace, along with Capricorn, naturally. Capricorn ruling all 5 of the first initiations. But Virgo is the third aspect of divinity, in a way, giving birth to the second aspect. And the whole, let me just say, you know, we have the group that Tuya leads, the Blue Rose Sisterhood, and it's very much about bringing the second aspect of divinity out of the third aspect of divinity, ruled by Virgo in a very substantial way. And then we leap to the very top, the crisis of the burning ground, really the final burning ground, where Uranus is the veiled hierarchical ruler of Leo. And that's a liberation, the liberation of mastership. Only to discover that each liberation is a kind of confinement in a still more expansive way. So, only when the universe goes pop is there real liberation into the absolute deity and its absolute infinity. And as far as I'm concerned, that's not even the absolute, but that's another subject. And so so those are all crises. And we talked last time about the crisis of individualization. So add this one to Cancer and also Gemini, bringing in the higher self and the lower self, the angel and the animal man, making finally the human being. And then we talked about the crisis of Libra. Maybe a lot of us have gone through that recently. We have to make a decision about which way the wheel is going to turn. And it's done there under the influence of Uranus. Now, this is a significant triangle. It represents the beginning, Leo, the midway point in a way, Libra, and then finally, initiation as the result. So, and very interesting that the solar angel and that hierarchy of beings is ruled by Capricorn in its higher aspect. So the secret of the soul is coming in there. So that's another very significant triangle, and it's considered to be the triangle of the father aspect. And these crises are only mentioned at this point and not earlier at the list of crises on page 472. All right, so then he has a little bit more to say. There are therefore 9 signs through which potencies pour, which are creative in their effect and which produce changes which are needed in the progress of the soul towards divine expression. Now, it's all a science, and our solar angel, having been a human in the past solar system and having been apparently to Sirius for training along the solar angelic line, really knows what we need, what we as an up-and-coming human monad need, the kind of rays we need to demonstrate in the personality and other vehicles, and the kind of signs we need as our sun sign and our rising sign. And here he mentions again the 3 signs of crisis, whereby the point in evolution is determined. And then he gives us a little bit of a repeat. Leo, Libra, and Capricorn constitute the triangle of the father, or the will aspect. Now you'll notice the rulership of Leo. The first ray comes through it, so does the 5th, and 5th ray souls do resolve upon the first rays. So there's a lot of first ray there, even though it's the second, excuse me, second of the fire signs. Now, when you look at Libra, DK only gives the 3rd ray coming through it. And if you look at the planets that rule it, we have Venus, exoteric, Uranus, esoteric, and let's see, what's the last one? I should, goodness, Saturn, of course. All right, so those are all hardline planetary influences. So the hard line interestingly comes through Libra, but there's something missing, and that's the whole Prince of Peace idea and the second ray and the relationship to the spirit of peace. But under ordinary circumstances, we can see how Libra relates to the father aspect. And then, of course, Capricorn, again, the only rays that are coming through Capricorn are the third ray, the first ray, the third ray, and the seventh ray. Again, hard line rays. So we don't doubt that this is the triangle of the father aspect. Saturn is very active here. You may remember in our studies, there was a kind of a triangle that went to Great Bear, Leo, Saturn, associating Saturn with Leo and with Shambhala. Then, of course, the exalted planet in Libra is Saturn, and the hierarchical ruler is Saturn. There we go again. And then with Capricorn, Saturn is famous, as being the ruler, exoteric and esoteric. Saturn is found in connection with all of these, and Saturn is the father, even though in the Kabbalah it's connected with the Bina, and that is, in a sense, the intelligence and somewhat the mother aspect. So, there's a lot of interplay going on up here, but we've got to get the ABCs before we can begin to really combine all this together. And let me assure you that if you do memorize these things, make a deliberate effort to memorize what's related to what and what comes through what and all the rest of it, you're going to be in a much better position to make the necessary combinations. Then, so these are three signs of crisis, and we've been looking at them, and they were not, well, not all of them were listed in the original 7 signs. Excuse me. Then Cancer, Virgo, and Pisces. Now constitute the triangle of the mother, or the matter aspect, conditioned by intelligent activity. Now, if we go back to the previous solar system, someone wrote me recently and said, isn't the mother aspect quite connected with the previous solar system? And I would say in general, yes, as the third aspect of divinity is connected with the mother aspect. So Cancer, ruled by the moon, is ruling the first half of the previous solar system. And Virgo, also ruled by the moon esoterically, is related to the previous solar system because it rules the second half. Now, Pisces is a water sign, and everything lunar and imagistic and so forth we find in connection with Pisces as well. So somehow these are very, in a way, lunar signs, Cancer, Virgo, Pisces. They indicate, and this is a little different from what the triangle above indicates, they indicate points of opportunity of an inner kind, wherein consciousness is concerned, and therefore you have the recognition of mass, individual, and group consciousness, and in that order. Because the mass consciousness is ruled by Cancer, we are aware, and we're really fighting that today. People are at a certain stage of evolution where they're still kind of moving around in the hall of ignorance, and they're not so aware that there is a higher power. There is that soul. There is that solar angel. They're not aware of it. Or they just project it out and say, well, that's God, Well, okay, in a way that's God, but the fact that you have this great higher power already within you, this is something that people have to come to, and we as students of esotericism who know a little bit about this stuff, we have to convey to them in a logical, reasonable manner the story of that higher power, of that inner power, and how you can rely upon it. So anyway, The consciousness aspect is found here in this second group, leading to the Christ consciousness, which has its apotheosis, you might say, the very top of its expression in Pisces. When you look at the three great heroes of our humanity, they are Hercules, the Buddha, and the Christ. And they are associated with different signs, and as you may know, Hercules, the triumphant disciple, is associated with Scorpio, and Christ is associated, Buddha is associated with Taurus, another, kind of moon sign. The moon falls in Taurus and is exalted. No, moon falls in Scorpio and is exalted in Taurus, and then Christ with Pisces again. So that's his great sign, and that is really, really group hierarchical, even shambolic consciousness. So try to fix these triangles in your mind. And, the thing about it is, you look at your chart, and you say, well, my major signs, my moon, which I have to overcome, because it's all that past stuff, the sun that I have to utilize on behalf of spiritual things, and the rising sign, which is going to lead me to the soul. What are they? What is that rising sign, sun sign, moon sign? That's one big triangle in your, one big triangle in your life. And there are other triangles too. I mean, what if you had like the moon in Pisces? You would have to, avoid escapism, and you would have to face many karmic issues and be done with them. What if you had the sun in Taurus? Your life would be the cultivation of the light, and more light would come into your life, and you would recognize the light everywhere. What if you had Aquarius rising? These are going to be important signs in the future. Aquarius, the sign of the hierarchy. Taurus, the sign of the new group of world servers. Pisces, the sign of humanity that has to be saved. He does deal with that in the in the rules, just exactly something like that. And with Aquarius, the group consciousness has to grow, and you have to become in some way the server, giving out, pouring out what you have for the benefit of other people. So you've got a lot of sensitivity in Pisces, you've got a lot of light and wisdom in Taurus, and you pour it out for the benefit of people. Well, put your rising sign, your sun sign, and your moon sign together, and you've got the foundation of your astrological chart, and a major triangle, and it's going to show how you can guide yourself and be guided. And then later, what you'll do after having overcome the moon is you will have the sun sign, the rising sign, and you will have the point opposite the sun sign, which when you're ready, and if you're at that stage of evolution, is going to lead you to the way the monad functions in your life, or could function if you played your cards right, So there's a lot in astrology to help guide you on the spiritual path. A close study of the above ideas will prove fruitful in establishing methods and relationships. They should also indicate the key which astrologers can use when seeking to work with mass horoscopes. Well, there's just a hint there. And obviously these Cancer will be involved, and the signs of the mass will be involved in Pisces. Pisces is very interesting. It said that humanity takes its first incarnation in the sign Cancer long, long ago. But in terms of the individual human unit, the animal man of the period, his first incarnation is taken in Pisces. And the motto on the clockwise wheel tells us the whole story, doesn't it? Go forth into matter. So, you know, as a whole, we're incarnating in Cancer, the mass sign. Nothing spiritual about it at all in the beginning. Just, you know, learning how to live as a kind of a growing personality. And then Pisces, again, go forth into matter. Nothing spiritual there yet. Let's just say if you are Jonah, the whale swallows you, you know, and the whale of great size is the whole environment in which you are living, and every level of impact that you can find in the lower 18 lunar worlds. And that goes on a long time. Boy, you know, one day we're going to go into the movie house just like just like Kirk Douglas did in that great movie Illusion, a cheap movie. I mean, it was the guy probably made it on a shoestring, but boy, it was really esoteric. And he basically was looking at the Akashic records of his recent life, and he was appalled by what he saw, and he wanted to reverse it. He wanted to intervene. He wanted to help. And his motive was strong enough, so he got a chance to do that. And he was able then to save, you know, those who had otherwise been lost. So, you know, one day we'll all be sitting in that movie house all alone. And, you know, it doesn't mean that you're going to have to spend 70, 80, 90 years to see the movie, because things can go by in a flash when you're dealing with the inner planes, okay? But we're going to see the movie of our recent incarnation, and maybe it'll go back a little bit to show us where the impulses began and all that. And one day we'll figure out this whole thing, and the horoscopes and the rays which contributed to the different ways we have been as we're a growing personalities. So you have a chance here now, you know, to go more deeply into the esoteric side of astrology, which inevitably involves the science of triangles. You know, if he gives 100 pages to the science of triangles, when he finishes all the other signs, you know it's important. So, you know, study your esoterics deeply, and they will repay you when the time is correct. And don't lose faith just because it's a little difficult along the way. You will make it. Now, going on to where we were before, this is a bit of an insert. I inserted this thing about what was it, Leo, Libra, and Capricorn. I inserted that from another page in the book, but now we go on. And by the way, when you're getting ready, now maybe a lot of you have already done this, but when you're getting ready to reverse the wheel, and meaning the energies in your system, excuse me, they start to flow in different directions. They start to rise instead of to fall. Leo and Libra are really important. So maybe, you know, maybe the life of Sun and Leo, Libra rising, Sun and Libra, Leo rising. That's the reversal of the wheel. And there are a number of these reversals, and they begin well before the first initiation. The first one does anyway, because you've got to start heading in the right direction. So when you become an aspirant, and that is at the opening of the fifth petal of your egoic lotus, before the big crash comes, in the middle of the fifth petal, there's a big crash. Your tower comes, you know, hurtling downward, and you lose the worst demonstrations of lower ego, and then you're free to be an aspirant. That is where we begin to move towards the possibility of initiation and become, begin to think about entering the fifth kingdom of nature. Anyway, you will note that two of the constellations which we have just been considering, Leo and Virgo, and you'll recognize them as the sign of the Sphinx, won't you? It's the head of the woman and the body of the lion, but sometimes, of course, the lion is more powerful because the lion stands for the radiant soul and Virgo stands for the third aspect of divinity. So it just depends on how you look at it. Remember, with Master Decay, you're always changing your point of view. He's got a very strong Gemini in his chart. I think Gemini and Taurus are his two major signs, a tremendous illumination and all this flexibility to be the messenger. Well, he's always going to give you this law of mutation where you're constantly seeing things from this angle and that angle, and you go all around a thing, and it's not just one rigid point of view, okay? So Leo and Virgo, they are found on this list of the 7 crises, the crisis of the birthplace, Virgo, and the crisis of the burning ground, even the final burning ground. But remember, when you're dealing with a fixed cross, Leo represents fiery pain. That's the burning ground before any of those initiations open up. So what would you rather have? Blinding light, fiery pain, bitter woe, or maybe liberation under Aquarius? Well, you have to earn your liberation by going through the blinding light, the fiery pain, and the bitter woe. 5 constellations, he says, are not so intimately concerned, excuse me, are not so intimately concerned with the mass human crises that, just like everybody goes through, but are more definitely and specifically related to the unfoldment of the individual disciple. So we've had the list. We went through the 7 when we first started out, right? And now these other ones are Sagittarius, Libra, Taurus, Pisces, and Aquarius, related to the unfoldment of the individual disciple. Sagittarius will give you one-pointedness and that disciplic vision you need, and Libra will help you conform to the law and regulate law, sex, and money properly under a triangle, and will help you make the correct decisions, which will lead you on to higher use of the signs. And Taurus will introduce you to the great light and possibly bring you in touch with Shambhala in group formation. And Aquarius will make of you the world server, and then Pisces will make of you the world savior. So we can see that these 5 certainly have a lot to do with the progress of the individual disciple. Now, that doesn't mean when you have the other signs, which show up as crises in the life of just like everybody, that they cannot be used for a discipleship expression. They can be. Everything you've got in your chart, everything you've got in your egoic lotus can be used to promote your life of discipleship. But, it's better to be conscious about all this. Better to be conscious rather than just kind of blunder on through. It's better to learn what we can expect of any equipment that we have been granted by the solar angel in terms of our time of birth, so we can consciously use these energies. Now, Pisces has, he says, however, at this time a unique relation to the 7 constellations which produce the great human crises. It's so interesting when you're making that transition off the common cross, the immutable cross that you've been on like forever. Pisces is your transitional sign. And when you're making your transition into the possibility of living within the domain of Shambhala, Pisces again is your transitional sign, and some few people maybe, finish their fifth initiation with Pisces prominent in their horoscope, and they become the world saviors, and it's a pretty rough life, I guess. Most people choose Aquarius, or the solar angel chooses Aquarius for them. Pisces has, however, a unique relation to the seven constellations. It also completes the final effort of the triangle Leo and Virgo and Pisces. Well, you have the individual, then the individual Christ, and then the Pisces, the group Christ. Humanity as having the potential of demonstrating the Christ. It's the great pervading, inclusive Christ energy. In my view, even though at this time Virgo is the sign in which the majority of second-ray energy enters into our planet and affects humanity, I do believe that finally it will be shown that that decanate, cosmic decanate, ruled by Pisces and connected with the Christ, will be the major second-ray sign. It has been the steady impact of Piscean force which has at long last brought humanity, notice the world disciple, not yet the world initiate, but not even the world aspirant, more the world disciple now, which has at long last brought humanity, the world disciple, to the very door of initiation. Well, with Pisces, you begin to detach and you say, look, surely there must be more than this. And what are the higher worlds about? And maybe, Pisces is ruled by Neptune. It frees you to rise, and Pluto destroys your chains. So there's the whole way in which Pisces brings you in touch with much higher energies. Okay, so and of course, sacrifice. Oh, it's a tough one to swallow, but Master Moria says, when have you ever become less through sacrifice? The very thing that so many people are afraid of, I have to give up this, I have to give up that, is the very thing which advances us truly. So it's Pisces that has brought us to the door of the very door of initiation. And I think I want to make that a little bit bigger, I know it looks pretty ungainly, all of these different sizes, but they help me anyway study. Pisces leads to the first initiation, the relinquishment of the mutable cross. So the big thing is to figure out where people really are on the path. If they come to you, and of course for yourself as well, they come to you and they want their horoscope read, you cannot read their horoscope in a uniform manner. You've got to know what these signs may mean in their own individual life. When it comes to Aries, let's just say, starting in the beginning, you got to know whether that's going to throw you out onto the battlefield of life where you're going to be shooting bullets and wielding a sword, or whether you're going to be trying to conquer the element of being. It's a huge span, and we've got to know somehow about where people stand. Well, just take a look quickly at where DK's students were. Most of them had not yet taken the second initiation. A few had, and maybe very few had taken the third degree. Alice Bailey and I don't know about Foster Bailey, Alice Bailey, Roberto Saggioli, at least those two had taken the second, the third initiation, and there were a couple that he mentioned who had taken the second, and everyone else had their eyes on the second initiation. So whether it was 1 life, 2 lives, 5 lives, whatever, so you have to read their horoscopes in that manner. For over 2,000 years, Piscean influence has been playing upon mankind, for better or for worse. It has brought about the demand for world adjustment because it's got a big second ray energy in it. And it wants, somehow it's got a lot of compassion. And I would say that mankind has not been exactly noted for its compassion, even today, and has led to the formation of groups in every department because Jupiter is the force, Jupiter is the ruler. First ruler brings all things together, the force which brings all things together. So it has led to the formation of groups. And, Pisces is really good at dissolving the boundaries between people, the boundaries between groups, the formation of groups in every department of human living, and so laid the foundation for the future synthesis in Aquarius. Now here, the signs appear to be going backwards, and they are. This is the precession of the equinoxes, and the vernal equinox retrogrades through the various signs and constellations. So, a still higher aspect of Aquarius will show itself, higher than what Pisces was able to do. And Aquarius is the sign of universality. There's going to be a big synthesis. You can already feel it in the communications area. Group, wholeness, universality, fusion, and harmonization of the whole. That's coming in the age of Aquarius. The influence of this triangle finds symbolic expression. Now, remember the triangle we're looking at here? That triangle is Leo, Virgo, and Pisces. The influence of this triangle finds symbolic expression in the life of the self-conscious individual who reaches self-awareness in Leo, in the culturing care of Virgo, developing the inner human being and the soul and the Christ consciousness in an individual sense, even though Aries is sometimes connected with the cosmic Christ. And the final release in Pisces, we might call that the purest form of second ray energy, or the energy of the self, in which the power of identification is really cultivated. The power of identification, like I say, we're really working on that in our Identify as Being group. Identify as Being. And, just to mention it, I've been working on a thing. I haven't really sent it to everybody yet. But the whole idea is when you look at two objects or two people, there's something that unites them. It comes out of nowhere. It's like a kind of otherness, which is the very foundation of the fact that they seem to exist. They came out of it, and now the thing to realize, and it's not easy, is that the very thing that everything else came out of, people, whatever, take any two things, I don't care what kingdom they're in or whatever, they all came out of this something, this being, and this being is you. Now that's a tough one to, you can, understand it cognitively, but can you feel it? And, I'm working on that, and then how we can get that feeling at the bottom of our heart, so to speak, that any two things we see those things are united by something which is formless and intangible, and that formless, intangible thing is you. Now, it's a big stretch, but I hope it gets easier to explain. The culturing care of Virgo and the final self-release in Pisces. And the great self is revealed, and it's the pralaya of the little self and the Leonian ahamkara, I am, It ends up being I am that I am, or it ends up being thou art that. and Venus being exalted in Pisces shows us the elevation of our glorious individuality at the third degree into universality. So we move from Venus into Jupiter, into Neptune, and finally into the universalization of the self. Well, let's see if there's anything else here. We might here give a little time to the practical lessons to be learnt from the 7 crises through which man, the individual, and humanity, the larger whole, must pass. So I'll tell you what, it looks like that'd be a good thing to undertake the next time we work on this. I think so. You know, I try to help maintain a certain unified subject matter when we have a go at some of this stuff that is not so easy to understand. But so that we don't get things too mixed up, you know. We just work on that for a while, and working on that, we might get a clear idea of what that is. So what I'm going to do then is the usual. Let's see if I can just find it. Please bear with me, because the next time I go hunting, things are in better shape. And this would be the end of number 50. And this is September 11th, you know, another one of those days living in infamy. I guess, I don't know what page we're on here. 473, I guess. I guess we're on 473, where the crises are listed. So this was going to be Wednesday evening, which it is. And we'll start on Science of Triangles, number 51, and it'll be on the 18th. And we're on 473. But don't be in too much of a hurry to make progress by rushing. It doesn't really work. We have to deeply digest these matters and then see how they really do relate to ourselves and to our groups, and all that. See how we do that. Okay. Morning. All right. Now, I trust that if something was of interest to you, you made a note of it. And then in this time right now, when we can look at your thoughts, your statements, your questions, you can refer to those notes. It may seem like we're not really covering a lot, but the information is very dense. It's very dense. There's a lot in a little. And that's why this wonderful book, Esoteric Astrology, has to be read over and over again to go deeper and studied topically, So, and of course, we're very fortunate in the Moria Federation to have such good esoteric astrologers, some of which have been with us here, and others trying to open up this subject for everybody, and awaiting eagerly, I might say, the Tibetan's next dispensation, which he, when he started talking about the year 2025, he mentioned astrology right away. That was one of the very first kinds of outpourings that he seemed to be hinting at would be coming around the year 2025. So I think for a real treat and a treatment when it comes to a deeper understanding of these matters. All right. So I think if you have questions and or if you have statements you want to offer, this is the time. This is the time to do it. And if I'm blind, then someone else can advise me as where to go. Okay. Anybody want to say anything or ask anything, etc.? Remember, you've got to learn the alphabet before you can put the words together, and you've got to learn the words before you can put the sentences together, and those sentences make paragraphs, and pretty soon things start to make sense, and your mind becomes all that more flexible, and you'll make contact with your higher mind, and you'll be into the spiritual triad because you've been building the Antakarana under the influence of Mercury. Okay, so we have a question mark here or something coming up. Looks like it. Well, you know what's interesting, Stacy, about Pisces and Chiron? Chiron is it's a very important planetoid. There, you know, a lot of books came out about it when it was discovered in, I think, 1979, something like that. And Chiron was a wise centaur in mythology, and he was wounded by his student. Was it Hercules who shot an arrow? I don't know, into his sort of his lower leg or his heel. And because Chiron was a god, he couldn't die. He just suffered. You know, so what are you going to do? So, you know, then the story goes, he traveled the world to find out everything he could about the healing arts, and he became a master healer. And meanwhile, he learned astrology and the arts of war, and he learned everything. He traveled to learn how to cure his ongoing pain. And it just so happens that Pisces, because it's so intuitive and so sensitive, is one of the healing signs par excellence in the zodiac. I'll bet if you had the statistics to look at doctors and, you know, maybe psychologists and psychiatrists in the psychological field and so forth, you would find the sign Pisces well represented. So, in fact, Chiron, the healing planet in the sign Pisces, is potentially a pretty strong healing indicator, you know, showing that you can have that ability, or maybe it's a person who really needs it. But it's definitely associated with the arts, with the healing arts. That's, you know, something to be said about it. And what you do with Chiron, it just depends on where it is and how conscious you are about handling your horoscope. See what I mean? We don't want to be in a position where things just happen to us. We want to, in a way, happen to our horoscope. We want to be proactive rather than just reactive. So, you know, the sign, and you know, and of course, Chiron being in Pisces, where Hercules was shot with that arrow, I mean, a person could have foot problems, you know. Sometimes those kinds of things are indicated where the health issues come up, you see. So there's a lot to learn about Chiron, and he does seem to guide us off towards the higher triad, making a long pilgrimage via the Antakarana until we get into the higher triad, represented by Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. So that's the Chironic journey. There's a lot of good books about it, but I think that's pretty much the essence of it. Okay, other thoughts, other questions? You know, look, I mean, occultism is one big book, okay? So I always find that, I always find that, you can start anywhere and end up anywhere. And if you have questions about anything in spiritual occultism, it's fine. You can offer them now or ask now. I don't limit this. We do have a subject. Our subject is all these kind of interesting solar systemic and cosmic triangles, which eventually have an impact on our lives, but we can go anywhere. So, if you have questions about our general occult subjects, then you can ask them too. And don't be daunted, you know what I mean? It's a tough subject, but don't be daunted. Nobody knows anything here, so including myself. So we're just at the beginning and we're learning. Anybody? Or have I managed to scare everybody away? What's going on here?
Michael.
Yes, dear.
Do you hear me?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
I was just thinking about these 7 constellations, what he said, that they are like those which are bringing the necessary crises for humans. And always DK is emphasizing that importance to have crises. And I guess so that it is about that the question is, sorry?
Yes, go ahead. Yes, exactly.
Yes. I think that the question
here we're going to go right here, and you'll see there it is. Okay.
Yeah, the crises in that sense, which are bringing us into the different states, that it should bring us to, via the crises, our consciousness is, how do you say in English, to make rise?
Yeah, it's yeah.
And so it made me to think that it would be very good to try to teach oneself not to look about one's success in the terms of how we think what the success is, but we should put the emphasis over that have we actually risen in our consciousness, because I think that is the point, not the point of being successful in the meditation in the reappearance of the Christ. DK is asking from us, not based upon our success, but based upon our continuous striving, and in that sense, in the crises too, because all of us, we have them. And I think depression and feeling sometimes futile is based upon that, because we think about that we didn't achieve our goal in some kind of success in human terms.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
or maybe
right.
in human terms in esoteric field, but we should be looking that how did our consciousness rise, or did it?
Mm-hmm.
I think this is the point in crisis to look at.
Yes, I think you're very correct there.
And then it made me think about.
Go ahead.
It made me to think about all of these those constellations, those signs, and the rulers. I think the rulers become some of the key points for us to look at. How they are placed, or how are the transitions. They would give us hint how to go through those crises.
I agree.
So what do you think about that idea?
I think it's a good idea, and especially when we start dealing with, let's just say, not the first one, but when we deal with all the ones after that, we should maybe look at the esoteric rulers. You know, like look at Mercury over here for Aries. Look at Saturn, of course, for expansion, you know, and maybe Venus coming up. Look at Venus for Gemini, and when we learn how to give up the Earth for the sake of Venus. Looking at Mars in Scorpio, because those two signs, you know, they have the same exoteric and esoteric rulers. So, but Pluto is also active. Looking at the moon, veiling Vulcan, very important, and Neptune, both of them in Virgo, and then with Leo, looking at Neptune. You see, so those are the veiled planets, and they. What you said something when we were talking about it today. You said that they provide a focal point, that the planets provide a focal point for the ray energies that go through. I mean, you know, how the crises that we're going through, only we know, and the master, you know, the inner ashram might know. But DK basically said, look, if you're not having a crisis, why aren't you having one? Because he like yourself, he said that this is a big opportunity. Crisis is a big opportunity to ascend in your consciousness. So the idea of not avoiding crisis, see, you know, here's the whole thing. You could have a life where everything's easy. You don't go through much at all. You succeed in everything. You get what you want, and you don't accomplish a thing. All you do, you know, your self-satisfaction has risen, and you've felt, you know, kind of good about your life. On the other hand, there's that old saying, you know, we used to be familiar with it with Dr. Finn. He used to say, and that the personality loves trines and the soul loves squares and oppositions. So what that's saying is, with Master Moria, when things get tough, that's good. You know, he said the worse the better. So when we're confronted with these difficult moments, we have to look at what is the opportunity in this cross that we are being introduced to, whether it's caused by a square or an opposition or whatever. What's the opportunity in it, and how can our consciousness expand? Because if we're successful in everything and our consciousness doesn't expand, then that's not esoteric astrology. That's not esoteric anything. And that's just a different way of looking at things. So I wonder if we can look at our signs and say, what crisis am I going through and why, and get the most out of it.
You know, is it then when we think about transits of those planets, and then also how they are progressing in the chart, that I think that would become from that angle very important.
Absolutely.
And actually it would be very interesting to study, to look one's chart, how these rulers have been progressing and in what kind of field they are at the moment.
Well, you're going to have a chance. You'll have a chance because one of your major major rulers is Saturn, and it's coming to a conjunction of your sun in the sign ruled by Saturn. So you'll have a great opportunity to put this into practice.
And I really feel it and know it.
Yeah. And me too. I've got Saturn coming, you know, right there, opposite so many things. So you can just feel that tightening grip of circumstance and demand of the inner life, you know. And the difficulties are not off there somewhere. They're right there in your face, you know. The difficulties come up directly. Well, let's see. A couple more things have been said here. Wei Chi, sometimes in our most challenging moments, that we find the great opportunity to become a better human being. How you manage yourself will make all the difference in finding the opportunity out of Christ. So very much so, Stacy, if we could only remember it when we're having a tough time, that's what's necessary. And then Leslie has quite a thing here. Value of crisis from Agni Yoga, Fiery World, Sutra 75. The essence of humaneness is the substance of the chalice. I suppose this is meant, basically by the egoic lotus as the chalice. Therefore, above all, on earth, let us be clothed in humaneness and recognize it as an armor against the dark forces. I mean, he says, you won't fear obsession if your heart center is open and the heart center is connected with this humane attitude. A fiery manifestation will visit the heart through humaneness. Thus we shall realize once again to what a degree the farthest is the nearest. Okay. We also recognize each other through humaneness. Thus, in this hour of danger, and it was at the time he was writing, and it still is, let us labor for the most imperative. And DK backs it up and says, look, choose the essential and focus on the essential above all. So here is this great distillation of love, wisdom, energy found, in the head center and found in the egoic lotus and so forth. And we recognize the people of the soul by their humaneness. And we, look, when you're locking kids up in cages and not paying any attention to their health down there near the Texas border, this is not exactly humane, is it? It's cruel, isn't it? And that kind of cruelty has been noted, okay? It has been noted and questioned. So right now we're in a crisis of how will we be, or any nation, be humane to the people who are driven from their country by fear of death and corruption? Will we be humane or will we be cruel? And right now, under the auspices of rather cruel administration, cruelty is ruling quite a bit. The farthest is the nearest. Yeah, there you go, Leslie. So choose squares, oppositions, and not triumphs. Well, we should be happy every time we see a square opposition. But basically, what happens is the cross begins to rotate. And as the cross rotates, it spirals up and it produces the capstone of the whole process. So a synthesis results as a result of the cross when it is synthesized and elevated into the peak that makes of it a pyramid. Well, anyway, look, this is all our attitude, and I'm sure, if you're like me and something tough comes along and, why does it have to be this way? And maybe I don't stop myself and say, okay, now, what is the opportunity, not only for the person I may be speaking to, who may be very resistant, what is the opportunity for me in this, or for my group, or whatever? What is the opportunity in this? And I think we need to learn how to do that, But better. I'm sure we do it to a degree, but we learn how to do it even better. Right. Okay. Other thoughts?
Michael?
Yeah.
You missed one there in the questions from Bruno.
Oh, I missed one. Oh, Bruno. Okay, Virgo on the 10th house here with the moon. Okay, in Libra, in 11th house with Scorpio, Ascendant. Well, an elevated moon like that gives one the power to transform matter and spiritualize it. And your ruler is going to be the moon, and where the moon is found, either Vulcan, Neptune, or Uranus will prevail depending upon the stage of evolution in which you find yourself. Now, when it's Taurus and Virgo, Vulcan is often involved, but in general, Vulcan is the more material indication, and with the moon, generally the disciples are looking for whether it's mystical Neptune or occult Uranus. In my own chart, I check out both. I say, how would I handle this from if the moon was veiling somehow Neptune, or whether it was veiling Uranus. With Vulcan, I'm kind of hopeless, and I don't think it applies. When you know, the two signs are the M signs, the Scorpio and Virgo, and they both give the chance to bring the three aspects together. I mean, look, I am the mother and the child. I, God, I, matter, am. Mother, child, matter. I'm all three. So there's a synthesis there that's possible in Virgo, not just the analytical discriminative type. So basically, look, here's how it goes. When you come to Cancer, the moon is pretty well the ruler, and we can say, well, the moon always veils Neptune, and Neptune is really important in Cancer. But when it comes to Virgo, the moon is veiling Vulcan and Neptune. When it comes to Aquarius, which is in a sense one of the signs of Transfiguration, then the moon is veiling Vulcan physically, Neptune emotionally, and Uranus in terms of occult mind. All three are active. So what's going on with your moon, behind your moon, how it's transforming the lower 18 subplanes into something more useful to the soul, that's an individual question for everybody. Obviously, one has to look at these things very deeply, and then there are also these other charts, you know, hidden and interior charts, and let's just even just call them, you've got your normal birth chart, you've got your animation chart when your heart starts beating, and then you've got your conception chart. And Charles Jane always used to call them the ABC, you know, and two of those charts are hidden, and they're going to need rectification. Charles Jane, it was a funny thing, you know, maybe sometimes I'm falling into my anecdotage here, but, you know, I'll tell you little stories. In 1985, at the very beginning of the year, I was working in the Arcane School in New York, and oh golly, Charles Jane, famous astrologer, showed up in the office, and basically it looked like nobody wanted to talk to him. I was beside myself with you know, salivating to talk to this great astrologer. So, you know, being the impulsive, resourceful type, he basically left dissatisfied, and nobody would talk astrology. He came with some kind of gift of astrological knowledge, and nobody was interested. So I chose the back door, and as he was walking down to the elevator, I kind of cornered him and waylaid him, you might say, and then we developed a relationship where I would come to his house every Sunday morning. He lived maybe 35, 40 miles from where I was. He lived in upstate New York, and I was living in New Jersey. And we would just, you know, I would listen, we would talk, and I'd always take him out to lunch, because he was a Cancerian, I think. He had the Cancer rising. He just loved to eat. So anyway, we go out and continue talking and all that. And it was such wow, it was a whole, he says, I feel, Michael, like I've discovered a whole new continent, but I won't get a chance to explore it. Well, that was really true, because he died exactly on December 31st of that year, 1985. I visited him in the hospital, and he had all the nurses going with their astrology, you know. He was doing everybody's chart from his hospital bed. But I learned a lot, and I turned a lot of this material over to my colleagues, Nicholas Nelen and Malvin Artley, and some others, the 49 interior charts. And yeah, it was, they worked on it. And Nicholas has done a lot of good things with it, and I think Malvin too, and maybe there are others who have worked on it. But, you know, how to derive these interior soul charts. I mean, I'm sure a lot of research still has to be done on that. But if I had not, I said, look, I'm going to break the rules here. I'm going through that door. Well, Aries type, you know, they love to go through the door. Well, some people used to tell me, when you come into a room, you come in with the door, meaning, you know what that means. The door falls down. So anyway, that was a really good move on my part. And Charles and I had a great exchange on astrology. I wish we had the computer power in those days that we have now. And his work, major work, was passed on to those esotericists who wanted to take hold of it. And now it's been, it exists and it's available to people. Just talk to Nicholas, you know what I mean? He's the foremost expert in this now. And you know, he's a great astrologer, and you might be interested in some of these interior charts. Anyway, that's my little story about some of the hidden sides of astrology and how sometimes you just have to break the rules to get anything done. Okay, so that's it, Bruno. You know, of course, the rest of the chart is very important, but look, the ABC. What is your conception chart? What is conception really? Is it the moment of physical conception, or is it some other place in space and time? What is that animation chart? Seems to be connected with the heartbeat, and then the birth chart connected with the first breath. And, you know, you superimpose these three charts. And see, another thing too, we had in our University of the Seven Rays classes, we had some very resourceful people. Graham Dawson was one, and he made the solar fire program. And he continued to make it. He was cheated out of a lot by some other astrologers. It's terrible. They kind of took over his program. I don't know how that happened, but he developed methods of superimposition, which DK said would be important in the new astrology. And Nicholas knows a lot about that too. So just consult with him, and you know, maybe he'd give a class over the you know, over the internet on some of these techniques and all that, and you might find it interesting. All right. Anything else, friends? Anything else? Am I missing anything? Let's see. So we have Bruno. We got Bruno there, and Leslie, and let's see who else. Stacia, yes, and well, it's a great. You know, the greatest and oldest of all the sciences is astrology, and we have only the ABCs right now, but it's enough to guide our lives in ways that would not be possible otherwise. So you don't have to become an expert, technical, fifth ray, mathematical astrologer. It's enough if you know a few things, and especially the esoteric side of it that can help you live better as a soul. And, you know, get those triangles in your chart. You're going to find them. They're going to tell you a story, and especially the ascendant, sun, and moon, and then the sun, rising sign, and the point opposite. So the point opposite the sun. And I've sometimes wondered if the seventh house itself does not rule the spiritual triad, being out of balance with the soul at the ascendant. Because, you know, the sun and is the personality opposite the monad. And I've just thought to myself, well, we've got the soul, and I think we've got the spiritual triad under Libra at house number 7, because the triads of life are ruled by Libra. the triple flowers. So I think there's a whole new way of synthesizing the chart involving the seventh house, which might be interesting. And don't ignore your seventh house, because you may meet your dweller on the threshold right there, as well as the means of dealing with it via the impersonal spiritual triad. There's so much in occultism, just ABCs for us right now, but there's so much. So simply persist, no matter what, and the benefits will come to you. Okay? BL, am I okay here? Have I left anybody out of the works? Anybody
Bruno,
on staff want? Are we okay?
I'm sorry, Bruno had just a couple of more comments down there.
Okay. Thank you. I'll go to where we are, and right. And it'll be down to the bottom, and right. So stellium in the 10th and the 11th. Well, those are the Capricorn and Aquarius houses, of course, and good luck with that. Good old Saturn. Saturn in the 8th, you know, you end up facing the dweller there, you know, especially in Cancer. Cancer, you know, read what he has to say about Saturn in Cancer in the book. You do. I won't tell you now. Maybe you know. You just go there and see if you can find it. It's a pretty karmic position, and it looks like there's some squares involved here. But look, we can get the most out of any chart. You can have just a wonderful chart and make a mess of it, and you can have what looks like the toughest chart in the world. I remember, you know, no, it's another story. Someone in Australia, she was a very fine esotericist, and she says, well, Michael, I want you to draw me up a chart for the 4th initiation of my next life. Okay, so just for fun. So I drew her up the absolute worst chart I could find. Everything was just so hard and so difficult and all the rest. But I figured if she passed through that, she could, you know, successfully through that, she could take that initiation. And I showed it to some of my other friends in Australia. Oh, you can't do that. That's too hard. That's too hard, you know. Well, I did it, you know, and well, we don't know what the result will be. This story ends in a little bit of tragedy here, except, of course, for the deep beliefs of the individual, because she stepped out in front of a bus and was hit, and that was the end of it, you know. I don't know how that happened, but it wasn't related to the chart that I devised for her. I think sometimes, you know, I don't necessarily want to devise a chart for my next incarnation. I just like to kind of know what is the sign I die in, and I'm going to kind of leave the rest to the solar angel, who I think, you know, can see ahead, can see behind, and knows what is best. The further I go, the more trust I have in these powers that be, and I don't want to be too manipulative and say, oh, it's got to be this and got to be that, because there may be a whole bunch of karmic issues that I'm not aware of, and this greater being is aware of those things. So I just tend to, the old thing, kind of trust in God idea, trust in the solar angel, and wake up one day and, you know, there's a new life in front of you. Okay, friends, I think that's going to be it for the moment. So anybody on staff want to say anything final? Okay, if not. All right, well, let's see. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to, now what am I going to do? Tui and I have these kind of, we have different PowerPoints and all that kind of stuff. And let's see, we have all these. I'll tell you what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to look up the word triangle. Okay? I'm eager to get into the stuff that, that's not how you spell it. The Starling Hunter sent to me because, he's been doing research on these things forever, like. So this is what we use oftentimes for our. I like this one particularly. The showing our own little group of triangles, and then the triangles on Earth, and then the three Buddhas of activity, great beings. They used to be planetary logoi of all things. Imagine three great former planetary logoi cooperating with Sanat Kumara and sacrificing a great deal to do it. But when you have a different conception of time, and when you realize the nature of infinity, and you need to realize the nature of immortality and ongoing beingness, your whole attitude changes, and sacrifice, I think, goes along with it. So anyway, not to do too much, but come on now. Okay. So let's just, for a moment, think of the way that pouring through the ethers is this vitalizing energy that vitalizes our physical vehicle, but as well our entire personality, the higher ethers. And how, via the triangles, that which is high can descend into that which is lower and lift it up. And we just imagine for a moment, that some of these higher energies of the triad and even the monad can make their way down into our etheric system. It's a substitution of the ethers so that the nadis can carry some very high energies and really, start transforming this etheric body into kind of a body incorruptible. You can read about that in Cosmic Fire somewhere between 166 and 169. How that body incorruptible forms. And how we really learn to carry spiritual will, spiritual love, spiritual intelligence, how we learn to carry will, wisdom, and activity, the monadic qualities. And how we really learn to, to shine with these higher energies in a redemptive way here below. Not only because we try to do things, but just because of who we are. I remember when Tui and I were in Tallinn, Estonia, and the Dalai Lama was visiting, and he was approaching the church where all this was going on. You could feel him some blocks away. You could feel it just because of who he was. So one day we'll be that astounded disciple on top of the mountain of Transfiguration, and we'll see the passage of the energies as rivers and streams of force, and we'll be able to absorb and wield and express and all of this is just part of our humble triangles work. It all begins right there. So do your best to cultivate your triangles, or if you don't have any yet, to form. And if you have the will to form a triangle, it'll appear. And just realize that all these triangles are finally connecting you to the cosmos. Well, friends, we are approaching, that equinox time in Libra, and also the full moon. And we have Virgo full moon coming up, and a pre-full moon on Friday night, and Saturday in the wee hours here, at least in Europe, the Virgo exact moment festival. So we'll send you the links, but mostly the pre-full moon is a webinar. So, we'll try to get that to you. What is the link? And everything, excuse me. Everything else is the live link that we have for YouTube. So you know that one. And tomorrow night, we're going, it's the morning rather. Tomorrow morning here in Europe, we'll be doing the reappearance of the Christ, the weekly reappearance of the Christ meditation. And then Friday in the morning, we will have the glamour dissipation of glamour meditation. And by the time we get to the evening, at least here in Europe, 8 o'clock p.m. Well, our 8 o'clock. Yeah, 8 o'clock GMT. We'll do the pre-full moon, and then we'll send you the time. I think it's about 6 a.m. here, so maybe could be 3 a.m. that we begin for the actual full moon broadcast. We'll try to send all that to you as soon as possible. And that's actually pretty good for the people in the United States, and maybe, also in South America, and a little hard for the people in Europe, and possible for the people in Australia and New Zealand. So we, Tui and I do these triangles things every Wednesday. It's a Mercury day, and we want to thank you for attending. And want to thank the team that's helping us stay straight here so we don't get into too much trouble. BL, Michael, and Joe. And we look forward then to tomorrow morning tomorrow morning our time, and we'll do the reappearance of the Christ. And then also we're going to have, we have to find the times, proper times for them, but the sacred pentagram approach to the full moon. We've been doing that, and DK says you can use 3 days, 5 days, 7 days. We're using 3 days. Maybe the masters use the whole month. They start from the new moon, they crescendo into the full moon and go back to the new moon. Well, maybe one day we'll be doing that, but right now those 5 intense days, or 7, whatever, around the full moon are important. And we try to live in those signs and to express them in the right manner. So many blessings, lots of love from both of us, and we appreciate your that you showed up, and maybe we see you tomorrow morning, on the broadcast for the reappearance of the Christ. And we'll continue to make these announcements and to send some material to you so that you can know when we're working, and you can join us if you wish, and if the hour is convenient or if the hour is inconvenient. Before the days of computer, many were the night travels, driving the car for an exact full moon meditation at 2 in the morning or something like that. But okay, I take the Tibetan's word for it. The door opens like it does at no other time, so let's take advantage of those things. All right. We'll see you before long, and lots of love and many blessings. And we'll convert this and send it out, and you can get it on Makara. Okay? Thank you, and goodbye. Good night.